Hello, and welcome back to Felony Spectator. I am your host, Heather. On today's episode, we're taking an even deeper dive into the murder of Hae Min Lee, a high school student who was murdered by her ex-boyfriend. I will link part 1 and part 2 in the comments in case you need to go back. I also have the entire phone log in part 2, which I discuss in detail, and I think that part is really important because it gives you an idea about how inconsistent all of these statements have been. One of those stories is a visit to Stephanie, Jay's girlfriend. According to Jen, in her first interview, she says that after picking up Jay from Westview Mall parking lot, he revealed everything. The murder, the burial, asking her to go back and wipe prints from the shovels. So now Jay claims he wanted to make sure Stephanie was okay. So Jen drops him off and he visited her from about 8:30 to 9 p.m. Jay also confirmed this as well in 2 of his statements, but Stephanie said that she didn't speak with Jay until about 11:30 p.m. on the 13th. And why lie about going to Stephanie's house? Jay would have been better off just saying that he went home or went out for coffee. Why lie about seeing someone when you know the police will probably speak to said person? Remember, Stephanie is one of Adnan's best friends. People sometimes thought that they were dating because they spent so much time together. And she is also Jay's girlfriend. And this is really how Adnan and Jay started to hang out. Stephanie remembered getting a gift from Adnan on her birthday, the morning Hae went missing, and remembers Hae sat with her at lunch but was unusually quiet. It was said that Hae was thinking about Don, her boyfriend, that day. It's possible that Hae was actually quiet because she was thinking about how Jay cheats on Stephanie. Adnan had told Hae this information, and about a week prior to Hae's disappearance, there was an assembly at school that Stephanie wanted to skip so that she could go hang out with Jay. Adnan had to convince her not to skip because he knew Jay was at home with another girl. And this angered Hae, and she admitted that next time she saw Jay, she was going to confront him. Interestingly, there is a note on file that one of the officers scribbled down from Jay's first interview before it was recorded that says 3 p.m. met Stephanie at school, back lot. And this didn't come up in the recorded interview or ever again for that matter from what I could find. Stephanie claims she came home from school around 2:55 p.m. and then went back for a basketball game at 3:30. Again, she still hadn't heard from Jay, just carrying on like normal. So was Jay at the school? The 3:15 incoming call was in Woodlawn, and this tower sometimes does ping at the school. Then we have a call to Jen, Nisha, Phil, Patrick, all around the same area. So was Jay there? In the HBO documentary, Jay mentioned that he was bringing Adnan's car back to him at the school, which was his idea, but left because he couldn't find him. I guess Jay didn't think to check the library. Maybe Jay ran into Hae, who confronted him, and he snapped. Remember, Debbie also says she thought she saw Hae closer to 3 p.m. Now, we all seem to think that Hae had some big important thing to do after school, but maybe it was just that she was really busy. She had to grab a snack, the fries and apple juice, talk to Summer about wrestling, go pick up her cousin, go back to the wrestling match, eat dinner, go to work, see Dawn. She had a really busy day. Another thing I really want to know is if there was any proof that Jay actually went shopping. He says at one point he went shopping with Adnan in the morning, and then he says he went shopping before hanging out with Jen with her brother. Then he testified that he did indeed buy Stephanie a charm bracelet and also looked at perfume as well. Did he actually do that on the 13th? Was there a receipt? Did Stephanie receive the bracelet? And maybe that info is out there, but I couldn't find it. If you know, let me know. Why do I think this matters? Because it's one more place that Jay needs to squeeze into his timeline, and it's really not talked about much at all. The whole point of having Adnan's car was to get Stephanie something for her birthday. And even though Stephanie was Jay's girlfriend, Jay never told her anything about Adnan murdering Hae. Jay confided in Jen, but not Stephanie. Everything was business as usual up until Hae was found. Now suddenly he says to Stephanie that he had personal knowledge of Adnan's involvement and tells her Adnan had threatened Stephanie's life as well, so she should watch out for him because he was dangerous. And I find this odd, as do a lot of other people, because Stephanie and Adnan were best friends. Why would Adnan threat Stephanie? I also think we have to ask why Jay never mentioned this threat before if Stephanie was actually in danger. Stephanie and Adnan hung out every day at school and spoke every day on the phone. Adnan went to her house the day Hae was found, and he cried with her and their friends. They were really close. So if Adnan is this murderer and threatens Stephanie, why would Jay allow them to hang out and not warn her or call the police? Jay was also known to be a bit of a hothead. Even after 1999, when Jay had a plea deal to testify against Adnan, he would still be breaking the law. There was assault, theft, trespassing, and domestic violence charges on his record. And some of these charges even violated the conditions of his probation, which he was put on after accepting his plea deal, yet he never served any time behind bars. A little more information on Jay, and I guess this is hearsay, but in the Serial podcast hosted by journalist Sarah Koenig, she speaks of something very interesting. Sarah had reached out to Jay to interview him for the podcast, but he was very hard to get a hold of until one evening Sarah got a call on her cell phone from an angry man threatening Sarah to back off and stop recording the case. Allegedly, this man was screaming and cursing at her and then hung up. She called the number back and a polite man answered. She asked if it was Jay and he said yes. She then asked if he had just called and Jay denied it. And I guess Sarah continued to push him, and again, he started screaming and yelling and threatened her. Perhaps he didn't really want to get involved in the podcast, but his behavior, threats, lying, and then more threats might paint a picture of his character. Back to the investigation. Adnan still can't remember what he did that day, which is super frustrating. And here we have Asia McLean witness statement that was never used at the trial, and we have Adnan's father who had said that he had gotten dinner for Adnan and brought it to mosque. Adnan's uncle had also said that Adnan went to mosque every single night during Ramadan with no exceptions. Gutierrez, Adnan's attorney, unfortunately didn't push this hard enough with the jury. And the night of the 13th was very important because Adnan was going to lead prayer the following night and he was to practice on the 13th. If Adnan had missed prayer that night, I think someone probably would have noticed. So if Adnan was at mosque, it would then point to Jay going to Lincoln Park on his own because the phone was in the park. With that said, this really important night was somehow forgotten by Adnan as well. Why can't he remember the night before leading prayer and practicing one last time? Why can't he remember the night he was called by police? Why can't he remember the night his ex-girlfriend goes missing? So many big things happened to him that night. Let's say Adnan and Jay buried Hae before mosque. He was at Kristys' house at 6:30 where he got a call from police, and then the phone pings near Woodlawn at 7 where his home is and mosque. He would have needed to hustle back to the park, bury Hae, and make it back to mosque for 7:30, and this seems almost impossible. So he either didn't go to the park with Jay or he missed mosque. But did he actually visit Kristys? In 2019, when Kristys was interviewed, her school records were obtained and she would have been in a class from 6 p.m. to 9:10 p.m. Her course was a condensed 3 classes and attendance was mandatory, so they couldn't have been at Kristys that night. If they weren't there, then it's totally possible the boys could have both been in the park. Later that night, around 9:30-10, Jay and Jen returned to Kristys, again acting strange. Kristys remembers being annoyed by this because they weren't revealing what was on their minds or answering any of her questions. Kristys remembers being bothered by Jen's behavior because they were best friends and told each other everything. She didn't understand what the secret was and why she couldn't know. Now knowing Kristys has her days mixed up, we don't know for sure if that happened either. This visit to Kristys wasn't part of Jay or Jen's original statement. Originally, it was Jay going to Stephanie's. So we know Hae was buried in Lincoln Park at some point, and according to Jay, the boys would have brought the dirty shovels with them to a dumpster. So investigators took soil samples from the park, as well as Hae's car, Adnan's home, and various shoes, but nothing matched, which is really surprising to me. Forensics also tested what Hae was wearing, samples under her fingernails, necklace, a bottle cap from the car, condom wrapper, wire from the car, and there was no DNA linking Adnan or Jay for that matter. There was, however, female DNA from a wire that did not belong to Hae. This was filed as unknown. I am curious if there would have been soil samples in Jen's car, and could the DNA match her? She seems to be quite heavily involved in some sort of capacity. It was recently reported as of March 10th, 2022, as I'm filming this, that Adnan's legal team filed a motion to have the DNA retested. Hae's clothes, shoes, and a proper rape kit done, which was never done originally. If this actually happens, it could bring discovery of new suspects. I do also wonder if they could subpoena Jen's DNA because she seems to disappear sometime between 8 and 9 p.m. along with Jay. Now, remember when we went over the call log, there was mention that Jen and Jay went to her friend Mike's house for a birthday party. I couldn't find anything else on Mike, but Jen did testify in court that they did in fact make it at some point and stayed for about an hour before going back to Kristys, which Kristy confirms that they arrived around 9:30, 10 p.m. But this visit to Mike's was also not in the first few versions of Jen's story. I don't understand why she added this to her story. Maybe because she knew she needed a place to be between 8 and 10. Because they definitely weren't at Stephanie's, they weren't at Kristy's yet, and the phone pinged at the park. As far as I know, investigators never tried to find Mike to verify this party. Jay also doesn't mention this either in any of his versions. Then there was a man named Chris Baskerville who had some interesting things to say. He can't remember which day this occurred, so not saying it was the 13th, but apparently while they were at a pool hall, Jay got a call from Adnan. Jay says to Adnan on the phone that he was busy, but apparently Adnan insisted he had something really important to talk to him about. Jay told Adnan where he was, and then Adnan shows up. And I guess they go outside, Adnan and Jay, and this is where Adnan pops the trunk and shows Jay the body. Again, in public, outside a pool hall, and then Adnan leaves and Jay goes back inside. Jay then tells Chris what he saw, and he goes on to say that Adnan confronted Hae about flirting with a car salesman. She calls Adnan crazy and he snapped. According to Jay, the murder happened in the parking lot of the Woodland Public Library. Hae wasn't in the market for a new car though, and there's no mention in her diaries about a car salesman. She was in love with Dawn. Curious though that the phone did ping near the library around 3 p.m. The library is on school grounds. Chris also doesn't remember what day this was. And when did Jay go to a pool hall? This isn't in any of his stories, and if he's receiving a call, that means he has Adnan's cell phone because Jay didn't own a phone. So this story just adds a whole other level of strange events. Coincidentally, Jay had mentioned to police that he told 2 people about Adnan, Jen and Chris. But Jen and Chris have 2 completely different stories. Chris was also never contacted by police during the investigation. A former coworker of Jay's from the video store he was hired at after Hae went missing, which was more like a porn shop, remembers that after Hae's body was found, Jay started acting strangely. One night he seemed really scared and paranoid about a van parked outside the shop. At first Jay implied it could be the police, but then he implied he was scared of Adnan's people and someone of a Middle Eastern descent. Jay also mentioned that Jay actually told him that he helped bury a body, which Jay was totally caught off guard about. Why would Jay just blurt that out at work to a coworker? It just seems so weird to Josh that he didn't actually take him seriously and just ignored the whole event. Another strange twist was on April 28th when a police report came in saying that someone by the name of Dave Hogston had called police because a neighbor boy named Carter told Dave's daughter that he saw a body of a dead girl in the back of a car. And this girl happened to be Asian. Dave's daughter was never actually questioned about this, but Carter was. Adnan never knew Carter, so the chances of Adnan rolling up and showing this person Hae is not really believable. However, Jay was friends with Carter. They smoked weed together and occasionally hung out. Carter would later say that Laura wasn't lying per se. He did speak with her about seeing a body, but he didn't actually see it. He was just exaggerating. Carter had gotten drunk one night and told the story to Laura to scare her. However, Carter did say Jay had told him about Adnan killing his ex-girlfriend. Jay goes on to tell Carter that Adnan drove to Jay's house and showed him the body there. Carter never testified or was called to be a witness. So now we have Jay going around telling people about Adnan killing his ex and his involvement with burying a body. The problem is his story is different each and every time he tells somebody. Was it at his house that he saw the body, the pool hall, the public library, Edmonston Street, Best Buy? Why can't he get his story straight? And lots of people think Jay is telling people because he can't hold it in and he just needs to talk about it. Guilt, maybe? But what if Jay actually is planting these seeds in people's heads so he has people on his side to make himself look more credible? The way he handled being an accomplice just seems so unbelievable to me. Now, if you're framing someone, you might want to manipulate the situation and tell people that you know something someone else did. Sadly, Adnan's attorney, Cristina Gutierrez, wasn't herself during the trial. Her reputation was that she was one of the best. So the mosque Adnan attended had fundraised and gave her $50,000 as a retainer to get her to represent Adnan. And she seemed really interested in the beginning, but Adnan's mother would later say that most of the conversations would be about money and getting more payments. She would eventually stop talking about the case altogether and seemed annoyed if anyone asked her about anything. Other people who hired her around the same time would say the same thing. She started off great and then would be unprofessional, solely asking for money. She started to also come late to court, not communicating, and was fired by many who hired her. Near the end of Adnan's case, Gutierrez was in the hospital as she suffered from diabetes, MS, and became very sick. It said she ultimately just wasn't able to keep up with her work, and by 2001, her career was over. She took so many people's money and didn't do the work that she promised them. There ended up being over 28 claims against her, so a lot of people think that she just did a really poor job at representing Adnan. Gutierrez has since passed away in 2004, so she's not here to defend herself. Adnan's family did fire Gutierrez after Adnan was convicted of murder, but prior to his final sentencing. He would then have a public defender named Charles Dorsey work for him, who told Adnan that he needed to show remorse during the sentencing, but Adnan said he couldn't and he wouldn't because he didn't do anything. To which Dorsey said, quote, "Fuck you, you're fucking yourself," end quote. Now, instead of honoring Adnan and treating him like he was innocent, Dorsey threw Adnan under the bus during sentencing and said to the judge that his client was young and in love and had made a bad decision. He asked for mercy and the opportunity to somehow make up for his mistake in life. This obviously didn't go well because here's Adnan pleading not guilty, and then his lawyers basically asking for forgiveness in a murder. The judge told Adnan that he was manipulative and gave him life in prison with no parole. Adnan would fight for a new trial on the grounds that he was misrepresented, and Gutierrez at this point was disbarred. Then in 2001, Adnan would make an appeal for post-conviction relief because he believed he had ineffective assistance of counsel during his trial. And this was due to the letters from Asia that were never investigated. In 2013, this too was denied. Then on October 3rd, 2014, the Serial podcast does a 12-part series on Adnan Syed. And this podcast was extremely successful. It also made public a lot of the inconsistencies about this case, which renewed people's faith in his innocence. Sarah Koenig, Sarah's the writer of Serial Podcast and a journalist, reached out to Rabia, an attorney and family friend of Adnan, and they worked together to bring this to life. They have their own team of people investigating, they experiment with the timeline, and lots of people now think that he's innocent. So Adnan appeals the post-conviction relief denial, and in 2015, the case is reopened, and Adnan is given a new trial for 2016. I do believe this is largely due to the podcast. Adnan ended up with a lot of people on his side, and it was very public. Unfortunately, after 2 years of waiting for the new trial, it was denied again. Then in December of 2014, after the podcast is over, Jay speaks out again, but to the Inceptor, which is a news organization. After all of this, Jay yet again has changed his story. He now says he didn't know if Adnan had killed Hae in the Best Buy parking lot. He just picked him up there. He now doesn't know where Hae's car was, even though he apparently was the one that brought the police to the car. And this new version has them going to Kristys' house, where Jen is already there. They hang out, smoke weed, and then Adnan takes Jay home around 6. From here, Adnan takes Hae's car to his grandma's house and then calls Jay. And this isn't on the call log. And where is Adnan's car? We don't know. Jay then comes outside and Adnan pops the trunk, showing him Hae's body, asking Jay to help him dig a hole, threatening to turn him in for selling weed. Then Adnan drives away. I guess this threat is enough to convince a small-time petty weed dealer to agree. So Adnan returns in his own car a few hours later, closer to midnight, to pick up Jay to go hole digging. Jay grabs some tools from the shed and they go dig in the rain for about 40 minutes. Then they drive up to the hill to Hae's car. Jay then drives Hae's car back down to the park so he can take her out of the trunk and bury her. And Jay apparently waits by Adnan's car halfway down the hill. Adnan then walks to his car. I guess he leaves Hae's car at the park. And Adnan complains about Hae being heavy. Jay then drives Adnan back to the car, which is weird because that's where he just walked from. And then they dump Hae's car. And none of this makes sense. It doesn't match Jen's story, Kristys' testimony, any of the cell phone records, or anything he said in his first 4 to 5 interviews. At this point, I wonder why he can't be charged with perjury because he just doesn't have a clear and honest answer to anything. It's very confusing. In 2019, Supreme Court is asked to look at the case again, but the Maryland Court of Appeals denied the appeal again, and they said they didn't find that there was enough evidence to sway a jury to change their decision. Even though Jay has come up with an entirely new story, they now have Asia's sign affidavit as well, and discrepancies in the cell phone tower pings. Adnan's team tries again, but then again on November 25th, 2019, the Supreme Court of the United States rejected Adnan's appeal, saying the evidence linking Adnan to Hae's death was overwhelming, and they remain confident that the jury has made the right choice. I don't know if this is a surprise or not, because it's extremely difficult to get a new trial and have a conviction overturned. Almost impossible. If you're wondering why Jay didn't get in any trouble, he technically did plead guilty as an accessory after the fact, but his plea deal was no time served if he testified. It was also rumored that he got reward money due to the arrest and conviction of Hae's killer, and he used that money and bought himself a motorcycle. Why wasn't Jen charged? I have no idea. Possibly another plea deal. Adnan has always kept his innocence. He has never faltered, never wavered. The closest thing to a confession he has ever said is, quote, "If I had never met Jay, I wouldn't be here, so it's my fault I am here," end quote. And this could be interpreted as anything really. But he also says that the system isn't set up for people who are innocent. Once you have a first-degree charge, you're guilty, and it's very rare that you'll get off. So now when he meets people in prison with this charge, he always tells them to take the plea deal instead of pleading innocent, because innocence will always get you the biggest sentence. My thoughts? I have gone back and forth in my mind a lot. I have put an embarrassing amount of thought into this case, and I have come up with nothing new. I have read 2 books. I listened to the Serial podcast. I researched past news articles, official documents, and reports, and I still don't know. In my gut, I don't believe Adnan to have planned this too far in advance if he actually did this. At least not in the degree as to what the police are implying. I don't think he got the cell phone specifically for murder, and I feel like it was more spontaneous. That is, if Adnan did it. Don, definitely think he's innocent. There's more about Don I didn't really dive into, but I don't really think he had any part of it. Jay definitely either did it or had a huge part of it. Jen, I think, knows more and was maybe more involved. The huge red flag here is that Jay and Jen cannot get their story straight. It's one thing to have trouble remembering little things, but I feel like those two are all over the place. And typically when people can't get their story straight, they're lying. The Serial podcast thought that the bones of their story were consistent, but I completely disagree. The only thing they both had in common in any of their statements was that Adnan was the killer. The police claim that the phone records support what happened, but I don't think it does either. If Adnan did it, I still don't know why Adnan would ask Jay for help and why Jay would agree. What does Jay get out of it? There's no inheritance, there's no money. They weren't even close friends. To me, that's weird and gives me a reason to think that maybe Jay acted alone. With that said, next week I might think something totally different. Now, Adnan. Yes, Adnan didn't have an alibi because he can't remember a damn thing. But if he was planning a murder, you think he'd have that part worked out. You would know that you'd need a story, so why is he pretending not to have one? Now let's say it wasn't planned and he did it. Most people lie to get out of trouble. Even with the threat of prison, he came up with nothing. He couldn't even agree to seeing his uncle at mosque, and he can't confirm anything and says he just can't remember. Why wouldn't he say, yes, I was at the library, and yes, I talked to Asia, or yes, I was at track with Will, or yes, I was at mosque. Yes, I talked to all of these people who say they saw me. There's my alibi. He has literally sat in jail thinking that things would just work themselves out. Adnan's story also never changes. I mean, there isn't much of a story, but at least he's consistent, unlike Jay and Jen. I do have theories, a few of them, but the fact that there are so many lies and inconsistencies, I'm not really sold on any of them. My biggest issue with Adnan being responsible is why isn't he throwing Jay under the bus? Why not say, yeah, Jay and I did it together, Jay helped me, and Jay also needs to be accountable. But he's not, and Adnan's silence is frustrating. It's also hard for me to believe that Adnan can go to track and mosque and talk to his friends without missing a beat, whereas Jay starts acting weird. But maybe Adnan is more cold-blooded than I'm giving him credit for. Should Adnan have been sentenced to life? I don't know. There really wasn't any real physical evidence other than the cell phone records, which I'm not sure prove who did it. Nobody can prove without a doubt who had the cell phone. Nobody can prove without a doubt who actually strangled Hae. Hae's family seems to think justice was served and Adnan did it. And I really hope the right person is in jail. But I have a feeling that Jay and Jen might have gotten away with something more. At this point, I don't think Adnan is going to get out of jail unless something remarkable happens. So I feel like he should just come clean if he did it. For Hae's family's sake, give them some answers and some closure. Adnan says he's a devout Muslim, but according to Islam, honesty is the key to spiritual success. So he needs to start being honest. If you made it through all 3 episodes, thank you so much. I would love to know your opinion or your theories. There is a lot more information out there, and I couldn't possibly fit it in without making this a million episodes long. So if you have something to add, let's talk about it in the comments. That's it for today. Thanks again for joining me here at Felony Spectator, and we'll see you soon.